Rome didn't build its empire on courage alone. It built it on debt. We like to picture Roman legions as unstoppable warriors fueled by honor and discipline. But behind those shiny helmets and sharp gladi was a massive reality, an incredibly expensive and incredibly complex supply chain. Thousands of soldiers needed food, weapons, roads, and pay. Horses needed feed. Siege engines needed timber and labor. All of that meant one thing: money. A lot of it. So how did Rome finance centuries of conquest? And why does this story still matter today? Because once you look closely at Rome's war machine, something becomes clear. War wasn't just fought on the battlefield. It was baked into the economic system itself. And once that system got going, it couldn't stop. Expansion wasn't a choice. It was an economic necessity. Sound familiar? Let's rewind. In the early Republic, Rome's army was made of citizens. If you owned land, you could be drafted. You brought your own gear and hoped to return to your fields when the campaign ended. But as Rome expanded, wars got longer and farther from home. The old model broke. You couldn't just grab a spear and disappear for a year anymore. Rome needed professional soldiers. That's when Rome started centralizing military financing. The state began paying soldiers, not much, but enough to keep them loyal. Then came the real turning point. Conquest became a business model. Every new province meant more taxes, more slaves, more mines, more tribute. It turned into a self-feeding loop. War financed more war. But here's where things get interesting and dangerous. Rome didn't rely only on taxes. It leaned heavily on borrowing. During long, draining wars like the Punic Wars, the Republic took massive loans from the wealthy elite, especially the rising financial class, the equities. These weren't patriotic gifts. They were investments. And investors expected returns, interest payments, tax farming rights, business monopolies in newly conquered lands. War became a business. The more profitable it got, the more Rome went to war. Look familiar? Over time, this militarized economy reshaped everything. Generals gained political power because they could promise loot. Senators became shareholders in violence. Private contractors, the publicani, handled everything from logistics to tax collection, skimming fortunes along the way. It was the ancient version of a military-industrial complex, just in togas. And the costs? They piled up. To pay soldiers and creditors, Rome constantly needed new revenue. When expansion slowed or rebellions drained the treasury, Rome turned to its oldest trick: debasing the currency. Under Nero, the silver content of the denarius was quietly reduced. Over the next 2 centuries, emperors kept diluting it. A once trustworthy silver coin became a thin promise backed by nothing. Inflation surged. Confidence collapsed. By the 3rd century, Rome's monetary system was in free fall. Meanwhile, the rich kept getting richer. Senators and equities hid their wealth in land, slaves, and overseas accounts. The poor paid taxes in devalued currency. Public services collapsed. Corruption grew. And the cost of endless war fell squarely on the lower classes. This wasn't just a military collapse. It was a monetary one. Now pause and look around today. Governments with massive deficits. Wars funded by debt. Central banks quietly expanding the money supply. Financial elites growing richer from defense contracts and crisis profits. An economy addicted to growth. Military, monetary, or market-based. Not a perfect parallel, sure, but the resemblance is unsettling. Rome teaches us something simple. An economy built on constant expansion, especially violent expansion, eventually hits a wall. You run out of lands, resources, or enemies. Revenue dries up. Debt doesn't. Expectations don't. That's when a state starts squeezing its own people. Rome did it through heavy taxes, more debasement, more control. Bread and circuses for the public, fortified villas for the elite. Sound familiar? Today we don't call it tribute. We call it taxes, monetary policy, or quantitative easing. But the mechanics are the same. Central banks print money. Governments overspend. The rich buy assets. The poor watch their grocery bill climb. Wars are still financed through debt. The U.S. spent over $2 trillion on the war in Afghanistan, mostly borrowed. Who got the contracts? Who earned the interest? Who paid the price through inflation and weakened services? You already know. And just like in Rome, the cycle feeds itself. Debt becomes normal. Money printing becomes routine. The exception becomes the rule. That's why economic history matters. These aren't dusty stories. They're warning signs. Rome shows us what happens when a state hands too much power to private finance, becomes addicted to expansion, hollows out its currency, and crushes its lower classes under impossible burdens. Not because anyone was evil, but because the system had no off switch. Today we live in a different kind of empire, digital, global, driven by capital flows rather than legions. But the game hasn't changed. Money and power still move together. War is still profitable. Inflation still punishes the weak. Illusions still hold until they don't. So what can you do? Start by seeing the pattern. Most people don't. They think inflation is random, that taxes are just necessary, that debt equals freedom, that growth can last forever. The Stoics had a word for that: delusion. You can't fully escape the system, but you can understand it. You can stop playing blindly. You can build resilience, not just financially, but mentally. Study financial history. Watch for systemic strain, not just market hype. And always ask, who profits when I stay confused? Because you weren't supposed to know any of this. Not how Rome funded its wars, not how modern states do it now. You were meant to focus on the show, the headlines, the GDP numbers, the distractions, not the mechanisms, not the incentives, but now you know. And once you know, you can't unsee it. Financial education isn't just about budgets and investments. It's about understanding power, understanding systems, seeing through the illusion of stability. So the next time you hear about a new war, a new stimulus package, or a new crisis, don't just watch. Follow the money. See who lends, who earns, and who pays in the end. Because history teaches one hard truth. Empires don't fall when enemies reach the gate. They fall when the math stops working and no one dares fix it. If this gave you a new perspective, stick around. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.